And I think we're ready to kick this off.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Come on. If you would just.
Don't.
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can go on?
So relationships are hard. Today, we want to give you some strategies to help you design your desired relationships, new or established, professional or personal. So it might be that you're thinking about the upcoming holiday gatherings and what might be happening then. Perhaps you're thinking about 2024 and some of your work relationships that you'd like to improve. And we want you to think about someone or some ones that are really important to you so that you can participate in the activities as we go through this today. So one of the things that we want to make sure that you do is have just a piece of paper in front of you so that you can do some writing. There'll be some writing exercise in this. A little bit about us, my background, Pete Berridge, CEO of Change Positive. And I've got Andrew here that's helping to manage this, and Angel that's helping to manage this. So feel free to put questions in the chat. They'll interrupt, and or you can certainly take yourself off of mute and interrupt as we go through it. But what we do at Change Positive is really inspire individuals and organizations to embrace a culture that values dialogue, transparency, constructive feedback, collaborative growth, where staff become allies of one another in their professional development, in their personal development, in their well-being. So those same skills that we work on there, we believe are applicable to us in our everyday life, in our relationships, whether they're corporate or whether they're personal. So we want to share some of those skills with you as you enter this holiday season and are engaging with people important to you, yet maybe you struggle with them to connect in the way that you'd really want, or you want to take that relationship a little bit higher. So to get started then, today, we're going to talk about why are those conversations hard. We'll do a little bit about why dialogue, feedback is hard. Then we're going to turn our attention to positive psychology approaches that might help. While these approaches are not magic, just you being here for this 1 hour and putting effort into improving a relationship is a gift. When one person in a relationship changes, the relationship changes. So this is a gift to them, a gift to you. And by the end of the hour, then I want you to have more hope for your relationship with this person. So it'll take a little bit of effort on your part going through this. So first of all, we want you to have one person in mind so that you can create your own plan, your own approach and intention for that relationship. So take a moment then. The first activity is to identify somebody with whom you'd like to have a better relationship. Now, on that piece of paper, just write down their name, but also write down the relationship to you. Are they your mother? Is it your mother-in-law, a coworker, boyfriend, crazy uncle, neighbor, boss, sibling? So the name, but then the relationship too. Okay. So now what we want you to do is you can scan this with your phone, or you can go to the link that is now in the chat and you can click on that link. And I want you to put in the relationship of that person to you, not their name, but just the relationship. So we can get a sense of who are people thinking about today? Is it a coworker, a parent, friend, partner? Partner, husband, sister, coworker, daughter. Oh, daughter, coworker. And the more people that are responding with a particular word, the more that word is going to get bigger with this particular word cloud. So it looks like friend is coming up to the top. Son, husband, coworker, cousin, daughter, a lot of personal connections. Nice. Friend. So it looks like the most is a friend. Improving that relationship with a friend. Interesting. All right. So that's your who that you'd like to have a better relationship with. So now, why is it a little bit difficult? Why can these relationships be difficult? Why are they so hard? And we've talked about this before if you've been on some of the webinars, but I'm going to focus on it a little bit more. And that is thinking about the negativity bias and how our brain actually developed. And this idea that negative emotions are stronger than positive and potential threats grab our attention. Otherwise, we simply wouldn't be here. It's essential to keep us from succumbing to dangers. It's what keeps us alive and has kept our species surviving and evolving. We pay attention, we notice potential threats. And a few years back, I was listening to Marty Seligman, the University of Pennsylvania, talk about this default response that we have. And to me, the fun part was how Marty described this negativity bias. He said the negativity bias is like our tongue. It's always swirling around our teeth, looking for any sort of intruder. And when it finds that little popcorn husk, that's where the attention goes. And it's going to focus on that until it dislodges that popcorn husk. That's the negativity bias. It's always there on alert. It's not that frequently that our tongue is just cruising around our teeth saying, oh, they're so smooth, they're so clean, so beautiful. And while this metaphor for negativity bias is memorable, and it sticks with me, maybe I've been thinking about this, it maybe underestimates the negativity bias because it's constant, it's ever present, and it's mostly unconscious. We'd likely underestimate how much we're continually scanning the environment for threats, physical, but also social, in our everyday environment and in our everyday interactions. Do we dare speak up in a meeting or express an opinion at a family gathering? So just as we scan the environment before we step into the crosswalk, we're always scanning the environment when it comes to our interactions with others. So overcoming that default response is going to take intention, practice, and some vulnerability on our part. So we want to give you some tools for doing that today. We'll be sharing 3 or 4 different tools for you that you can work through today to prepare yourself for that relationship going forward. So the first one, you've maybe seen this before, is thinking about how do we move from thinking about problems to solutions? Taking a solution-focused approach rather than a problem-focused approach to that relationship. So what I want you to think about, if I were thinking about a relationship, the things that come to mind right away because of that negativity bias could be these. They're always negative. They need to be involved in everything. They don't trust me or others. They need to control everything. That happens rapidly. It takes a little bit of effort to think about, well, what would I want instead? What would it look like? Well, maybe they'd start with possibilities. They'd be clear about who's doing what. Is everybody bringing mashed potatoes? Is everybody, who's cooking the turkey, or are we doing ham? And who's doing that? They share their own concerns, fears, and vulnerabilities. They open up to me. And they ask me about my ideas and hopes. They're curious. So now on that piece of paper, now that you've identified the individual, I want you to do a big T chart. And on that left-hand side, what are those things that come to mind right away that are more of the problem? And then take some time to think about, on the right-hand side, what would you want them to do instead? And get this into behavioral detail, specific, that you could see it in your mind's eye. When would it happen? Where would it happen? What would they be doing that you would notice a little bit differently? And when you've captured some ideas on both sides of that T-chart, I want you to just do a thumbs up or do the little emoticon thumbs up. And here's the interesting thing. Even if you never tell the person what is in the right-hand side, you'll have primed yourself to see what you want rather than seeing the left-hand side behavior and saying, there they go again, because you've put that effort into starting to imagine what those behaviors are. And when it does happen, you'll almost unconsciously respond to it. You'll maybe nod or smile or offer a comment. And later on, we'll talk about how those comments, how you can do that in an effective way. Okay. So thumbs up, do people have? Are you still writing? Okay, I see a thumb up. See some nods. Okay, we'll go with nods. We're going to go with nods. This time it's going to be nods. So back to Mentimeter. Okay. So now, want you to identify one problem-focused word from that left-hand side. You can scan again with your phone or in the chat. I'm putting the link back out there for you. So what's the problem-focused word? What's not working in that relationship? Critical. Oh, silent. They go silent. Not taking responsibility. Self-focused. Judging. Forgetful. Interesting. Oh, and I can't see what's over here. There we go. Assumption. Distracted. Assumptive. So as you read those words, just think about what kind of energy does it bring up in you? Does it zap your energy a little bit? Okay. So now I want you to type, what are 3 solution-focused words, up to 3, that you came up with that you'd like to see instead, those behavioral words or behavioral statements? What would you notice in them? And I believe that that's actually the same link. Yeah. Open, play, curious, prayer, manage, attentive, responsibility, listening, appreciation, shares, curiosity, accepting, sharing time, empathy, externalize, communication, listening, checking in, sharing feelings. So one of the hard parts of this is that, or one of the things that I encourage you to do is taking these even further. And what I mean by that is that these can be concepts, understanding, curious, open. Ask yourself, how would I know? What would they actually be doing? What would they say? What would they say that tells me they're checking in? They'd ask me what? When would it happen? Where would it happen? When they're being intentional, what does that look like? What does intentional look like? If that was yours. If they're curious, is curiosity asking you about you? Is it asking about what you've done? Is it sitting down? Is it making facial? What does their face look like? Is it making eye contact? So the more we can actually see it in our mind's eye, the more likely it is we'll notice it when it starts to happen. And it's by noticing it and reinforcing it in subtle ways that people shift, people change. We can actually influence others through how we show up with them when we start to do those little micro reinforcers of each other. Awesome. So now, so that's the T-chart. The second tool is brought to us from David Cooperrider, Appreciative Inquiry. Has anybody heard, are people familiar with work by David Cooperrider? See Peter, Alex, Julia, Jen nodding. Good. Have you applied it to relationships before? Have you thought about it in terms of a particular individual that's important to you and what that could look like if you take that particular tool and just take that intentionality and time to apply it to a relationship? So if you haven't heard of David Cooperrider, this idea of identifying a desired future to move toward rather than problems to move away from. And he's an individual that, as he was studying and completing his PhD, traditionally in organizational consulting, we take an approach, a problem-solving approach, deficit-based approach that's outlined on the left-hand side. What's the problem? What's the root cause analysis? Brainstorming solutions, analyzing those solutions, developing treatment action plans, and then going back and circling through it again and again. He didn't like that so much. He instead found himself just getting really curious about successes that he saw in organizations like the Cleveland Clinic. And so he crafted a new way. And that new way was trying to really understand, when are we at our best? When is a group at their best, an organization at their best? When is the problem not a problem? So discovering the best of what is and digging into the strengths. And then he took it to this dream phase. So the idea of what might it be? What could we be? And he has a special way of doing that. And then it gets grounded. It brings it back down to the design phase, because design really drives outcomes tremendously. And so what will it actually look like? And then finally, who will be doing what by when? The delivery. So, but it's building from a desired future rather than a failed past is one of the key components of that. So what we want to do is take some of these ideas that he had and apply those to relationships. So he would say that in every organization, or in this case, in every relationship, something works. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in relationship with them. What is it that works? When does it work? That positive deviance. And the moment we ask a question, it influences the group, whether we're asking a question of ourselves or asking a question of them. We can ask a why question and maybe put people back on their heels, or we can ask a how question or a what, or a statement of tell me more. And what is it about? Is it about successes or is it about problems? So this idea of becoming obsessed with learning from our successes, by doing that, by understanding what's happening, this discovery of us at our best, it allows us to feel more confident carrying forward the best of the past. We know that it's possible. So that takes us then into the dream phase. And one of the reasons why we like to sprinkle in some videos and some other fun things in a seminar, webinar like this is because we become more creative through positive emotion. So how are you bringing positive emotion to that relationship? Do you take time to laugh together, to bring some humor, to share something fun that happened, to open yourself up, to open them up? Because through those positive emotions, we actually expand our vision. We become more creative. We become more open. So now let's take this to that relationship that you've got. If we understand what drives success in our relationships in the past, we know it's possible. If we consider then what made it possible, were we well rested? Were we in a different environment with the person? We want you to think about that experience more. Then we want you to think about, what were the strengths that you were using? Were you using your humility, your honesty, your humor, your forgiveness, your perseverance, your self-regulation, kindness, curiosity, social intelligence, or your spirituality at that time? So what we want you to do on that paper is write down a time when you've been successful and connected well with them. And then go further. What made it possible? What strengths did you see in them? What strengths did you use? So take a moment, identify a particular situation that worked well with you and them, and dig into it. Dig into that success. So if you have the situation, what made it possible? In detail again. How did they show up? How did you show up? Where was it? When was it? What strengths did you use? What strengths did you see in them? What was their physiology like? Their attentiveness, your breathing. And if you would be willing to share, or if anybody would like to share what this has prompted in you or the situation, feel free to come off mute and to do that. Or you could type it in the chat. What is one of those moments that worked really well in that relationship? We won't be pushing people to participate. This is a really personal time to think about somebody important in your life. And so no pressure to do so. So where do we go now? The second part of David Cooper-Ryder's approach. Going into the dream phase, we've done the discovery and writing about that, what the situation was, what supported it, what strengths you saw. Now we want to move into the dream phase. And he has this really unique way of doing this. He said, imagine that you fell asleep and it was a beautiful sleep. It lasted for a year. And you woke up and you were so refreshed. And you looked around in this environment, this situation, in our case, in this relationship, and everything that you had hoped for had come to fruition. What would that look like? What is your highest hope for that situation? Or in this case, this relationship? Working together, being together. So what would be different? What would be better? So imagine that in your relationship and start to talk about how the two of you would be engaging with each other. So moving into this future state, start writing about your highest hope for your relationship. What would the tone be, the tenor? What would the energy be like? Thing is, if we can't see it, we won't see it because of something called inattentional blindness. We want to be able to envision and be drawn toward that future. It may not all come to fruition, but we're moving in that direction. I love seeing the contemplation on people's faces. I mean, how often are we this intentional about a relationship and literally putting pen to paper? What a gift for them. What a gift for you. So in just responding to a message in the chat, it's hard to get past the bitterness sometimes. And so how do we do that? What comes to mind first around that is simply acknowledging for yourself and for them that that's hard. Because what I found in using this in corporate environment when there are broken relationships is that it can feel like you're just stuck, like you're corked. And the thing that I found most effective in those situations is to name it and to say, wow, that sounds hard. And for some reason, that seems to provide a little bit of a relief, because then following it with, and what would you want going forward? What would it look like? Maybe that going forward is some sort of reconnection or forgiveness, or just naming between the two of you, or it might be just within yourself, acknowledging it and seeing if that can help to uncork a little bit. I appreciate that comment coming in, because this isn't easy. So I want to offer then a third tool. And this is, how do you become an ally? How do you become an ally for someone? What can you do to help bring this vision to fruition? And frankly, you've already started by focusing on the relationship. But something from positive psychology that I found fascinating is there's been a lot of research around what undermines relationships. John Gottman, if you're familiar with the work that he's done, and talks about the 4 horsemen of the relationship apocalypse, when relationships move toward criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling, that's a predictive of that relationship going bad. He can predict with like 96% accuracy whether a couple is going to get divorced by watching them have one of their unsolvable problems for as little as 10 minutes. Yet he's an individual that said studying relationships that failed didn't teach him what were the components of those relationships that thrive. For that, you need to study thriving relationships. But that's how it's built in us, that we think we need to understand what's broken and fix what's broken, and that'll make us thrive. But what positive psychology, Marty Seligman and others say is, no, we need to study what makes us thrive in order to practice those tools and to put those into place and creating thriving relationships. So reducing behaviors that undermine relationships is not the same as increasing behaviors that strengthen relationships. And some of the most prominent researchers in this area are Rice and Gable. And they were really curious about, how do we respond to each other when things go right, when things go well? And it was termed capitalization. People share successes with us in little ways every day. And how we respond or capitalize in those moments is crucial, they found, to that relationship success. And they came up with this 2x2, 4 different ways to respond when somebody offers a success, one of their successes to us, or something that's gone well for them. We can respond actively, constructively, that enthusiastic response, digging into it. We can be passive, constructive, that silent support, or that's nice. Active, destructive, pointing out the problems with their good news. Or passive, destructive, failing to acknowledge it and turning to a different subject to be able to say, oh, that's great. So guess what happened to me today? And focusing the attention on themselves. So what they found is that how people respond to positive events is actually more predictive of that relationship staying together than how people respond to negative situations. So how we respond to how we savor is more important than how we fight. So and what's really interesting is that the only response that actually builds the relationship is the active and constructive up here. Even the passive constructive over time leads to the relationship breaking down. So an example then, did you hear that I got a promotion and I got promoted to a new job? And here's how the person you share it with might respond. That's amazing. Tell me more. How did that happen? How do you feel? Or they might say, that's nice, honey, the passive constructive. Or they might say, wow, are you in for a big surprise? That's way outside your area of expertise, the active destructive. You thought you were busy before? I'll never see you now. Or the destructive, passive destructive. What's for dinner? Guess what happened to me today? And what what I realized for myself in trying to craft a new relationship with my parents before they passed over the last few years of their life is that I found that I could use this as a way of thinking about how do I interact with them? Where do I commonly interact with them? And so they would call every Sunday. They would call. I've got 5 siblings. They would call every Sunday night and they would catch up and they'd say, what's new? You know, what happened? And it became a really rote conversation. And sometimes I wouldn't answer, or it would be like, you know, not much. What's going on with you? Not much. Or they'd say something that happened that week. And I'd say, really? So you went to the Legion again? You had another pork sandwich? How exciting. You know, how about putting some of your time into getting the house ready to sell? And then I really started to think about that relationship and where am I putting them? I'm putting them either in the passive constructive, the passive destructive, changing the subject, or even the active destructive. And so I took the time and some intention to change that. And I simply started digging into the smallest things that were happening over the course of that week for them and asking them what went well. Tell me about that. What'd you hear on the call with John, with Jim? Yeah, they named us after the apostles. So Peter, James, and John. And but then Bobby, I don't know where Bobby came from. He was the silent disciple or apostle, I guess. But anyway, he was the washout. But he's the only guy that went on to get a master's in theology and work at a seminary for his entire career. But anyway, what are you hearing from others? And from my siblings, what's going on there? How do you feel about that? What are the smallest successes that you're having? So I want you to think about this person that you've written down. You know, the last time that they shared good news with you, how did you respond to that? In which one of these quadrants was your response? Or what's your typical response? Where do you typically put them? So we have an opportunity again for you. And here's the next question. How have you been responding to your person? You can go back out there now. Has it been in that first one of active constructive? Has it been in number 2, the active destructive, which was up on the right-hand side, upper right? Has it been in the lower left, the passive constructive? That's nice. Good job. Has it been in the lower right, number 4? Has it been in that passive destructive? Oh, what's for dinner? Guess what happened to me? Turning the attention to yourself or something else. So we're seeing a lot of the passive constructive. And we think that that's something that builds the relationship. And actually they found it doesn't. Over time, when you don't respond actively and constructively, people stop bringing you the good news. So we even have an active destructive, a couple of active destructives, pointing out the problem with their success, the problem with their good news. Cool. So looks like someone into the chat as well. So this allyship, maybe that's something that you can do in a relationship without even letting them know. You can just move your intentionality to more of that active constructive. And we know that with social support, we see slopes as less steep and feel burdens to be less heavy. Researchers found that simply having somebody stand next to us or priming an individual to think about somebody supportive of them By doing that, they literally saw a physical barrier in front of them to be less daunting. So instead of feeling like we're by ourselves and seeing the mountain as being huge, when we're thinking about somebody supportive or having somebody next to us, even silently, we start to see that obstacle is less daunting. So what would it be like if that relationship were lighter in that way through the actions that you take? So then that takes us to your commitment. What is one commitment you can make to support this person in your relationship? So on the sheet for the same person, what's one thing that you can do to support them? Maybe it is that forgiveness. Maybe it is that active constructive responding. We're simply looking for the strengths that you see in them that you named earlier when we were doing the appreciative inquiry aspect. Or maybe it is looking over your list of what's on the right-hand side of your T-chart and watching for those behaviors and reinforcing those behaviors. But what's one thing that you can do? One commitment you'll make? My commitment was to start answering those phone calls on Sunday night and to start putting my parents into active constructive responding. My response. And I'm glad I did. My mother passed about 2 years ago now, my father 1.5 years ago, and I still savor those times. And I think positively. I have these little reminders all the time of a movie I watched with my dad, a spaghetti Western or something like that, like I did this last weekend and on Saturday night. And I just thought positively of him because the end of his life was really a remarkable time in coming together with my siblings. So what's the commitment you can make? It doesn't need to be big. And if you're comfortable putting that into the chat, go ahead and do that. It's kind of nice to see what other people are thinking about. And if not, that's totally fine. So now you have your plan. You have the person, you've taken the time to think about them. You have your T-chart, moving to solution focused. You have the appreciative inquiry, thinking about past successes, what strengths in them, the strengths in you that led to that. And you have a picture in your mind's eye of this desired future. Again, the more specific, when will it happen? Where will it happen? The more likely it will happen. And then you have your allyship, ACR, active constructive responding, or your one thing that you'll do. And I see that some of those are starting to come into the chat, which is nice. So active constructive responses would be big, a real appreciation when the behaviors I want are happening, actually have to discover those. Thanks, Angel, for putting the resources in the chat. These are great. So now we've taken these concepts, we've applied them to a relationship important to us. I'll share with you a little bit about other things that we do at Shift Positive, how maybe we can be helpful to you. These are some of the things, some of the kinds of relationships, some of the work that things that might be happening in your place of work. And these are some of the things that we help out with, whether it is certifying coaches in the Shift Positive 360 methodology, some of the Shift Positive concepts, going deep to understand positive psychology and social support, how to influence that culture, whether it is coming in and doing training in organizations, whether it's helping a particular leader who is looking for garnering feedback and giving feedback, whether it's influencing a culture. Here's the difference. Here's the approach and how our approach is different from traditional feedback, where you can think about it in terms of traditional kind of dialogue. Oftentimes, we're digging into strengths and weaknesses. We're thinking about what makes things ineffective and what we want people to do less of. And rather, our approach is different. It is truly a strengths focus and going deep into strengths and understanding them, building on our past successes, identifying what to do more of, and providing context, or excuse me, traditional feedback and dialogue lacks context. It's often about concepts like executive presence and communication and delegation and things like that. And it's problem focused and past failure focused. And the Shift Positive approach is different. It provides specific context, specific behaviors. It get things from concepts down to behaviors. It's solution oriented and building toward a desired future. And traditional feedback then, because of these things, is often one way, anonymous, confidential, and it lacks follow through and people feel unsupported. Our approach is different. It creates two-way accountability. Even though we've been talking throughout this about a person important to you and what maybe you'd like to see them doing differently, what you've really been building is how you're going to show up differently. It recognizes that it's two-way responsibility and accountability. And our approach is open and transparent. If we're focused on what we want more of and what we appreciate, then it doesn't need to be confidential. We can get past that negativity bias that tells us that it's not safe because we're focused on what we want rather than what we don't want. And then we truly can become an ally because we don't change by ourselves. We change through relationship, interaction, intentionality with others. Here's a little bit about what we have going on at Shift Positive coming up. If you're a coach and you want to get certified, that's something that we do. We have a little stepping stone, an intro to certification. Our next one's coming up January 10th. And then you can find out more on our website at shiftpositive360.com. We do manager training, as I mentioned, and we'll be posting more or sending out about our next webinar. And if you simply want to have a conversation, just email me. And then we wrote a book. So there's a book out there too called Feedback Reimagined. If you want to understand more about these concepts, and if that's something that you can apply in your workplace, in your relationships, then Feedback Reimagined is out there. It's a nice thin book and it's got cool concepts and lots of stories. So encourage you to do that. Alex asked, Pete, are you still doing Shift Positive Live? Yes, we are. So that's another thing that we do. Here's the book, Feedback Reimagined, Transform Your Organization Through Positive Psychology and Social Support. What we find, though, is that people start applying it to their personal lives. And here's some of the people that are involved with Change Positive, with Shift Positive, some of our partners, some of the organizations we work with. And yeah, I guess that's where we kind of stop the share. And we'll just open it up for dialogue or conversation or people to say goodbye. But it was lovely having you here and wish you, I would love to hear, actually, ping me with an email of a small step that worked for you in your relationship. And if this was helpful in getting you there. Yeah. Questions that people have? Thank you, Peter. What else do we have to add, Andrew? Do we send out a link to this recording? Any stuff like that we do?
Yep. Yeah, so you guys will get a recording to this either end of today or first thing tomorrow. We'll send a link out to you guys with all of that information. Then a link to our upcoming webinars, newsletters, all of those things. We'll provide that in email to you guys later today or tomorrow.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you all. Thank you, Lynn. You're welcome, Leslie.
Good seeing you, Pete.
Good seeing you.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah.
Hope to see you soon.
Uh-huh.
Hey.
All right. Sue, you've got ideas. Wonderful. Oh, with your son. Wonderful. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. So I think we can stop the recording.